Israel has declared war on Gaza after a surprise attack by Hamas militants on October 7th, which saw thousands of rockets fired into Israel alongside a well-coordinated air and sea attack. Now, civilians living in Gaza are facing the consequences, with the Israeli military ordering some 1 million civilians to evacuate towards the southern part of the besieged territory.
אנחנו מטילים מצור מוחלט על העיר עזה. אין חשמל, אין מזון, אין מים, אין דלק. הכל סגור. אנחנו נלחמים בחיות אדם ואנחנו נוהגים בהתאם.
According to international aid organizations, a complete siege would violate international law, and the UN human rights spokesperson says that move by Israel could amount to a war crime.
All parties must respect international humanitarian law.
And what happens to the people living in the Gaza Strip? To understand that, we need to talk about how Israel hits targets there. In many cases, the Israeli military sends warnings to areas they plan on targeting by calling on the phone, dropping leaflets, or roof knocking, where an inert bomb is dropped on a building shortly before an armed one falls. This sometimes gives civilian residents just minutes to evacuate before the bombardment begins. This isn't just Israel being kind, but a requirement by the international law governing the targeting of civilians. This happened in the densely populated upscale neighborhood of Ramallah, which was hit by hundreds of overnight Israeli airstrikes on October 10th. Ramallah is home to universities, media and aid organizations, and even civilian government ministries. Now much of it lies in rubble, with the surviving residents looking for shelter elsewhere. As of October 10th, at least 200,000 out of the 2.2 million people living in Gaza have been displaced, and that number is expected to rise significantly. If Israel hit civilian targets in Gaza without warning, Hamas said that it would respond with threats of hostage executions. Now, on the Israeli side, since this conflict started, more than 4,500 rockets were fired from Gaza, hitting Israel indiscriminately. As of October 10th, the death toll has surpassed 1,000, with over 2,500 Israelis injured. At least 14 American citizens are among the dead, and there are possibly some others being held hostage by Hamas, according to US President Joe Biden. On the other side, in the first 3 days of this conflict, at least 790 housing units in Gaza have been completely razed, and over 5,300 have been severely damaged, according to the UN. At least 765 Palestinians have been killed in the retaliatory bombings, including at least 140 children. Outside of Gaza, the bodies of at least 1,500 Hamas fighters were found dead in Israel, and Israel is promising severe retaliation.
אנחנו נשנה את פני המציאות ברצועת עזה 50 שנה קדימה. מה שהיה הוא לא מה שיהיה. אנחנו נפעל במלוא העוצמה.
Israel says it already carried out hundreds of overnight strikes in Gaza in what it calls Operation Swords of Iron. The bombings have already damaged 3 water and sanitation sites, leaving nearly a quarter of the people in Gaza without services. Many expect the situation will only get worse. So why don't they just leave the area? Well, it's not that easy. Since October 10th, there has been no way in or out of Gaza. People are simply stuck, limping from shelter to shelter until this conflict ends. Lastly, the international community and the UN have warned both sides to have restraint and respect the laws that govern war. The killing and targeting of civilians by Hamas and Israel could lead to accusations of war crimes on both sides. But in the past, most of the accusations of war crimes have been leveled against Israel during its ongoing illegal occupation of Palestine and its siege of Gaza. In the 2014 Gaza war, Israel received over 500 complaints in relation to 360 alleged violations. UN schools that were housing refugees were targeted by Israel, killing civilians. Journalists were targeted and killed, and the UN accused Israel of attacking hospitals, schools, homes, and other civilian facilities. Israel has responded to these claims by saying Hamas uses these locations as cover for attacks. With the death toll rising and fears of possible Israeli ground assaults growing, what's next for the people of Gaza?